Hey, welcome back, everybody. Pat and I here with another episode of Real Talk. He's joining me this episode, so I'm not just some loser up here talking by myself. And we're here to talk about the new Venom movie, which we saw last night. So, I'm seeing a lot of mixed reviews about the new movie, actually. Like, on Rotten Tomatoes, I know not everybody likes to follow Rotten Tomatoes, but sometimes they can be a pretty good judge of, like, what the public opinion is. The critics are, like, at a 30. And what were the fans at? I think it was like 87, I want to say. 86, something like that.
89% last I checked.
There's a lot of split here and mixed reviews instead of like pretty much one people sticking one way or the other. And I've got a pretty good idea of what some of these problems are that people have with the movie. I think it was a pretty good movie. Do I think it was amazing? No. Do I think it deserves all the shit talk that it's getting? No. Pat, what do you think?
I don't think it deserves a lot of the shit talk. I think that people who are really complaining about this movie are taking it a little too seriously.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, it's a superhero movie. Like, how serious do you really want it to be? Like, just have fun. It's a fun, entertaining movie. Just let it be that. That's all it's meant to be.
Yeah, regardless of what I think of it structurally as a movie, I was definitely entertained from beginning to end. You know, even with slower parts of the film, at least on the initial watch. I don't know how I feel maybe seeing it a second or third time. Let's dive into the characters. There was Eddie Brock, a.k.a. Venom, and then there was his girlfriend, fiance, who leaves him very early on in the movie, and then there was the villain, right? What was his name again?
Carlton Drake.
Carlton Drake, and he's the typical evil guy running the company. In front of everybody, he's like, you know, that he tries to act like he's this innocent man trying to save the world and make everything a better place, maybe even find, you know, surviving in space as opposed to on Earth. And then behind the scenes, he's very cold, and it's very clear that he's just, you know, after trying to get these symbiotes to bond with people because he believes it's the future, and he's prepared to do it at any cost. You know, no expense of life matters really to him, it seems like.
I thought he was relatively interesting. You know, his motive's questionable as in anything. I don't know why space travel comes before trying to fix the environment on Earth, because that was part of his motivation, was trying to find a new home for humans, since we're, according to the movie, one generation away from an inhospitable Earth.
Right.
So, I did think the dichotomy between how his public persona, and then you see it start to break down when Eddie Brock starts to antagonize him in the interview a little bit, and then you get to the full other spectrum of his personality, which is behind closed doors in his lab, where he just does not care at all about sacrificing humans for his experiments, even before the symbiotes. That's how one of the reasons Eddie Brock wanted to interview him was because he found out that he had been doing tests on humans and had been killing people.
Yeah. It's certainly a slow build, what with him playing innocent at the beginning. I think the best contrast of this is when he's entertaining a group of school children that have come to like his building to, you know, on a field trip, right? And he's playing all innocent and nice there, and then there's this great scene later where he's bonding the symbiotes with people and it's just killing them. And as this one guy comes in, this junkie that he's trying to use, he knows that his name is Abraham.
Isaac.
And Isaac. Well, getting my figures mixed up now. That's a little embarrassing. But anyway, so he points out that his name is Isaac and, you know, talks about the religious implications of that name, right?
Yep.
And so he says, you know, you should sacrifice yourself. And the guy seems about it for a minute. This is a pretty good manipulation move. He actually seems kind of sort of sold, right, on this whole sacrifice thing. And then as soon as they open the symbiote thing behind him, he's just got this expression like, oh, fuck, get me the hell out of here. And, you know, naturally he dies. And, of course, you know, Nathan Drake is just like, all right, next guy, right?
Yeah, Carlton Drake is just
Drake.
Pulls in another
I don't know
person
where I got
and
Nathan Drake from.
Just does not care.
Right?
I think it's a different character.
Probably.
But, yeah, he just shows no remorse, does not care at all. Just on to the next one.
Right. Eddie Brock's fiance / ex-girlfriend.
She was interesting enough. She's kind of almost like your typical kind of girlfriend plot device in a sense. Though she did end up playing a bigger role where later on in the movie she ended up combining with Venom.
Yeah, she gets covered in the Venom suit too, actually, which is really interesting. And I guess that's a little callback to the comics, which I didn't know about before.
Yeah.
But I've since looked into. I guess she actually gets covered in the symbiote suit in one of the stories.
Yeah, and so she takes the symbiote and saves Eddie and gives the suit back to him, and then at the end of the main fight or whatever it is, she ends up helping through using sound waves to disrupt the symbiote. So she has a couple of good moments.
Yeah, and she's not totally useless. I don't even think she's really... Is there any point in time where she's the damsel in distress?
No, not really. She's never in any danger or anything like that. She is taking care of herself, and like it's established in the beginning of the movie that she is a very capable, intelligent person, and then she leaves Eddie after he betrays her, and she's a powerful lawyer, and so she's a good character, and I think that she could have been a little more interesting in the story, but overall I thought she was good enough.
Yeah, not the worst leading lady. All that's left is Tom Hardy to talk about, right? Well, a.k.a. Eddie Brock, a.k.a. Venom, right?
Yep.
That's whom he was playing. So, I actually thought he was the most interesting part of the movie. Go figure, because Tom Hardy's a pretty good actor. He's been a rising star. I think he's pretty good in just about anything I've seen him in.
Yeah.
And I would say... There are parts where, like, how would you describe him, right? He's more of like a go-getter, right, at the beginning?
Yeah.
He's chasing all these stories and trying to, like, uncover...
Yeah, he's kind of a polarizing, like, media figure, you know? He's constantly trying to uncover conspiracies and things and trying to help people who are in need and just trying to, in the public eye at least, do the right thing and help out as many people as he can.
Yeah, and that's what I liked a lot about the character is there's moments where, like, you know, he's reporting and trying to uncover the truth, and he believes that he's helping out his fellow man. But then there are also scenes where he hacks his girlfriend's computer to further his news career. There's a part where a convenience store is getting robbed, and he decides to just, you know, not do anything about it, which I actually thought was pretty unusual for a superhero movie, especially when at the beginning they're establishing pretty early that he's trying to stand up for the little guy, which is certainly different from the Eddie Brock that we've seen in Spider-Man things in the past, because, you know, he's usually there to kind of be a douche or a dick or whatever to play towards Spider-Man, but Spider-Man wasn't in this movie for that to really happen.
Yeah, usually he's a counterpoint to Spider-Man, who is kind of a snarky but good guy, and so normally he's just kind of a little, like, they make him out to be like kind of a dim-witted jerk a lot of the time.
Yeah.
It seems like. But in this movie, since he's the main character, they're not going to just do that. He has to be an interesting character with some sort of depth and some sort of inner conflict, which I think was played out relatively well in the sense that in his personal life, he's kind of a mess and kind of not trustworthy with his relationships with other people. But then in the public eye and on his television show, he's going out of his way to be this kind of, you know, shining light of truth in the media. He's trying to bring out all the terrible things people are doing.
Play between Venom and Tom Hardy was great because it's like this voice that only Tom Hardy can hear in his head, and it's a voice that's like demanding all these crazy things, and it's like basically shouting at him, right? It's like trying to it's like trying to have a conversation with someone while Screamo is going on in your head, and it's like juggling those things. And whether they're being sarcastic, serious, or, you know, just goofy, all their interactions were pretty entertaining, I thought.
Yeah, and I liked how Tom Hardy kind of handled having the symbiote, which is this creature that lives inside of you and has some sort of control over you to an extent. Like, I particularly like the one moment where he's sitting on a bus, and then Venom just screams, "Food!" And, like, it's Venom's whose arms are reaching out and pulling him off the bus seat. And, like, just the way he did it was very, very good, and like, it didn't look like he intended to pull himself up. He looked surprised, and his arms looked like they didn't kind of match what his body language was doing, which was good. But yeah, it was a funny character, a funny dynamic, especially when Venom like starts kind of making fun of Eddie a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like one of the first things he says, "You're kind of a loser," right. Which I thought was great. And then,
at one point he even says, "You're a loser like me." Like,
exactly.
Toward the end when Venom's like trying to relate to him or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
Early in the movie Venom calls him a loser, and you're like, "Oh, that's kind of a dick move." And then later in the movie Venom's like, "That's all right, man. I'm kind of a loser too, so we can be buddies." And you're like, "Ah, cool."
Right, exactly, and even the goofiness like that can be pretty funny.
Yeah, it's a superhero movie.
Right, and then one of the other things that I noticed, one of the critiques about all the characters, is I didn't really see much growth or change in any of them. you know, I almost felt like there wasn't hardly an arc to any characters. Do you feel like a lot of them changed for the better by the end, or kind of stayed stagnant?
I think that there was... Well, the one guy dies. He gets blown up. So
Right, the main villain.
That's a good arc. Alive, dick, dead. That's the arc you want to see for that character, right?
Yeah, those are my favorite villain arcs.
But I thought Eddie, there wasn't much of a very drastic arc for Eddie or Anne, his girlfriend, but there was an interesting kind of relationship arc.
Yeah,
right?
all that happens is I think she starts to like him again toward the end.
Yeah, well, he kind of grows a little bit through bonding with this creature that's inside of him, and he becomes a little better, a little less selfish, and by the end he's thanking her.
Yeah, he helps out the convenience store person this time.
Yeah, so the problem with their relationship is he's selfish, and then by the end, especially there's the one good moment in the car is where Venom says, "Hey, you never apologized to her for everything that you did that caused the end of your relationship. You should do that now, because there's a good chance we're going to die in a minute." And Eddie's like, "Oh yeah, maybe I should." And so that's like the moment where he kind of realizes, "Oh shit, I've been really selfish. I should express some sort of gratitude and remorse towards this person that I still very much care about." So there's a little bit of an emotional arc for him, but not as drastic as a lot of films would make an arc such as that.
Right. And then, like I said, they have great interactions between him and Venom. So there's this part toward the end. I guess he, was a big fan of, what's that movie? Oh, what is the movie? You know I'm thinking? Princess Bride.
Yeah.
When he's like, I'm going to cut off your arms, and I will cut off your legs, and I will eat your face, and you will just be, a turd blowing in the wind. It's like,
yeah.
That sounded just a little familiar, didn't it?
It's the first thing you lose will be your feet below the ankles.
Feet, both your arms,
Then your hands at the wrists.
and then both of your legs.
Next your nose.
We'll eat your face right up your head.
And then my tongue, I suppose. I killed you too quickly the last time. A mistake I don't mean to duplicate tonight.
I wasn't finished. The next thing you lose will be your left eye, followed by your right.
You will be this honest, legless.
And then my ears, I understand. Let's get on with it.
Wrong! Your ears you keep, and I'll tell you why. So that every shriek of every child at seeing your hideousness will be yours to cherish. Every babe that weeps at your approach, every woman who cries out, "Dear God, what is that thing?" will echo in your perfect ears.
Legless, faceless thing, won't you? Rolling down the street.
That is what the pain means. It means I leave you in anguish, wallowing in freakish misery forever.
Like a bird in the wind.
What the hell are you?
We are Venom.
I think you're bluffing.
Yeah, or reminiscent of the beginning of the song Method Man from Wu-Tang.
Oh, what? Woo! Good morning, ladies.
No, where they're just describing how they're going to torture each other.
I don't know that I know that Wu-Tang.
You don't know the line where he says, "I'm going to sew your asshole clothes and keep feeding you and feeding you and feeding you and feeding you"?
I fucking hang you by your fucking dick off the fucking 12-story building out this motherfucker.
I fucking sew your asshole clothes and keep feeding you and feeding you and feeding you and feeding you.
The story is kind of all over the place, and there was, I think, reshoots and rewrites of the script. One of the big problems is we've watched a few Venom-related things, right, gearing up for this movie. And what did all those Venom origin story things have in common that this movie does not have happening for it?
Spider-Man.
Right. This movie had no Spider-Man, which is a big part of Venom's origin story. So how do you write a story without that? You know?
Yeah, they even had to go so far as removing the classic Venom logo, because it's the origin behind the Venom logo is that he was in Spider-Man first, and so he took on that appearance afterwards when he went to other people.
Right.
So they had to come up with everything about the character had to be completely rewritten, because the story of Eddie Brock and the symbiote meeting and bonding over their mutual hatred of the same person just can't be there. So they have to come up with something outside of that to develop this character.
Yeah, actually, one of the things is like Pat pointed out, the original creation of Venom is a combination of Eddie Brock and Venom's hate for Spider-Man. And so one of the things that they did is in the original story is Eddie Brock loses his girl partially because of Spider-Man. He loses his apartment partially because of Spider-Man. And in this, Instead, as we mentioned earlier, he stole some of his girlfriend's information off of her computer. He ends up screwing himself this time, and he does it via, putting it, basically trying to get in this guy's face and getting the information from the bad scientist guy and get him to confess that he's a dick, which of course he's not going to do. But that ends up costing him everything. The guy takes his job away because he was already on his last string at his job, and his girl leaves him because she lost her job because, he made the bonehead moves that he made.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. So they kind of... Eddie's got a hatred for himself in a way.
I think he aims a lot of that hatred at the main scientist bad guy, right?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and I this is kind of a jump that I made while watching it, but I think maybe Venom didn't like him either. Because Venom had technically already met the scientist guy too.
Yeah.
But I don't know that he really have much of an opinion on him to go off of, so that might be reaching for the moon on that.
Yeah, personally, I don't know about you, but I feel like he has a reason enough to be angry at that scientist, considering the scientist trapped him, kept him in a tiny chamber, and then continuously used him on experiments to see if he could bond with other living beings. That probably sucks a little bit,
Yeah.
And then he's aware of what the motive of the other symbiotes is, so as soon as he has any sort of reason to believe that the other symbiote's going to work with the scientists who captured and brought them to that planet, then that's motive enough to hate the guy right there.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's also this thing in the story where the Venom suit is killing Tom Hardy.
Yes.
And when the Venom suit's confronted with it, he's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'll be able to heal you. Everything will be okay. And it sounds very dishonest, and it sounds very like, oh man, I'm busted now. I better try and cover my ass. And then they never really bring it up again. They separate. But then Eddie Brock gets captured, and of course Venom has to rejoin with him to save his life. And then they never really touch on that again. It's just like, all right, we're cool now, and everything's okay. I did hear something in the comic books that Venom's race does tend to actually drain their users, and Venom was, what's the word, disowned, thrown out, there's a better word for it.
Exiled?
Exiled. He was exiled from them because he believed in, actually holding on to his host and using his host. But that wasn't really touched on at the movie, and I didn't know that, just knowing basic, Venom facts. I don't know a whole lot about his character.
They touched on it very lightly, where Eddie mentioned something about dying or something along those lines, and Venom said, I wouldn't get rid of such a good host so quickly.
So quickly, though, I felt like that almost but I guess
Yeah.
Venom's a dick and he can imply all kinds of things.
Yes, he's a symbiote designed to consume another being to live, so yeah.
Yeah. Am I forgetting anything else about the story? What was the bad guy's plot again exactly? What was he even trying to do?
So, Carlton Drake was trying to explore the universe to find another place for the human race to live when the Earth becomes unable to sustain human life. And he had a bunch of ships that were going to launch into space to take people. So then, of course, Riot, the symbiote that did not get captured or got released upon impact in the initial crash, knew of these ships somehow and decided that he was going to hijack one so that he could bring all of his other symbiote brethren back to Earth with him to take over the planet and devour the population.
Yeah, and then that's the other thing. We don't even see the villain. We see the scientist guy, but what's the name of the symbiote that takes him over?
Riot?
Riot. We don't really see Riot until the last 5 or 10 minutes of the movie, right?
Yeah, you see an ambiguous symbiote character that has been taking over various people to travel across the world, including a little tiny blonde girl.
Yeah, I guess you're right. We did have that old creepy thing.
But you didn't see the symbiote. You just saw the fact that these people were possessed by something, and you're like, that's interesting.
Yeah,
What's going on here?
When's it going to pay off?
Exactly. And my question is, how the hell did that symbiote know that the scientist had a fleet of spaceships that he was going to use to populate the rest of the galaxy?
Yeah, or how did he even know where it was going? It's never been to Earth before.
Yeah, how did he
know which direction to take?
How did he know, A, to go to San Francisco, and B, how to get there using human modes of transportation, including commercial
getting into
airlines,
the lab?
Dude, a commercial airline. And the small girl just got into a lab somehow.
Right.
That's pretty terrible.
I guess the vents. She's small. Maybe the symbiote, I don't know, crawled up there. But, yeah. So the story and then the tone. The tone I thought was okay balanced. It was like I was watching a Marvel movie, and I'll get more into that later. But it was like they were trying to balance almost a little bit of scariness, but not too much, you know, like push the PG-13 a little bit. Some creepy, like, factor stuff. Not, like, really not going to keep me up at night, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And then, you know, comedy. I thought some of the jokes landed flat, but I thought all in all the humor was pretty on point, which was really surprising. Because a lot of people are trying to copy that Marvel humor and action thing, and it's not working for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that where Marvel gets most of their comedy right is they do kind of situational or character influence comedy, where it's an interaction between two people is funny rather than we just throw a joke in here because we need to laugh and we can make this situation into a joke. And that's where the dynamic between Venom and Eddie Brock came in. It was a funny dynamic after a while, because as they both start to learn what each other needs or is willing to do and what each other wants, they start to kind of barter a little bit. And you know, the moment where Venom makes the compromise of eating tater tots and chocolate instead of raw meat is just...
Yeah, I thought it was weird when he was eating raw meat and garbage and stuff like that. And it's like, he needs to eat more of those tater tots, you know, stay out of the garbage can. But that's just me. I'm a big fan of tater tots, right?
Aren't we all?
To the disappointments, I think there's a lot of reasons why certain people didn't like this movie. One is it's not really rated R, and there's a lot going on with that lately. Logan was rated R. 2 Deadpool movies were rated R. True, there's been comic book movies rated R before then, but none proved to be huge blockbusters like those. So why, again, is this a PG-13 movie about an incredibly violent character?
Yeah, an incredibly violent and ruthless and not as conflicted as it is in the movie. So I think they had to kind of play it up a little bit. They had to smooth it out.
Let me ask you a question. Did you see any blood in this movie?
Not that I can recall, but...
Yeah, tons of fight scenes.
They had the opportunity to have so much more gore, especially with how the symbiote talked. One of the first things he suggested to Eddie was that they bite off the heads of all the bodies in the room that they had just beat up, so that they could make a separate pile of bodies and a separate pile of heads. So they implied and talked about doing much more gruesome things. And even when you saw there are characters whose heads get bitten off, it's kind of the camera is moving away and
it cuts away when stuff like that happens
as the camera is leaving that spot. You know,
exactly.
So they could have definitely gone a lot different with it.
Yeah, and I think that would have changed a lot of people's opinion. Once again, humor. Playing on that horror aspect, I bet people did not expect the level of humor that was in this movie. I bet they were expecting a movie that was way more serious than what they actually ended up getting.
I think so, but I think that was kind of a necessary change in my opinion, because you can't just have an outright evil, ruthless, angry character. It's not interesting. So they had to throw in a little bit of humor and kind of nuance to the character and the interaction between the two. But I definitely get why people were disappointed, because it is such a dark character, and you didn't get that because they had to put a little bit more into him.
Yeah. I was really worried because this was another Sony attempt. I mean, sure, they've got Marvel backing them up a little bit more now. My understanding is that this was a Sony-led project with assistance from Marvel. But when I was watching it, I felt very much like it was a Marvel movie. So either Sony was trying to cash in on what they've been trying to do with their movies, or Marvel had a lot more influence on this than I originally thought. Because there was humor, there was the 2 cutscenes that have become so traditional now in the end of movies. There was a villain that is only in it for like 10 minutes and hardly has any character development. Character development of villains is a huge criticism in a lot of Marvel movies that they've only just recently now started to work on and address and do a better job of. And I'm trying to think if there's any other things that really made me think of Marvel movies. How about you?
It kind of felt reminiscent of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies.
Yeah.
To an extent, because it didn't make a joke out of the storyline or out of the characters, but it had funny moments and funny interactions. So it felt like serious enough, but lighthearted enough. And I thought that it would have been if it was going to be part of any universe, that one kind of felt the most. But I definitely get the Marvel comparison, because it didn't feel like it was trying to take itself too seriously. It's one of those, you have to be a little bit self-aware of the fact that it is a superhero movie. It's about aliens from space combining with humans. So like you almost have to go that route of Marvel, and I think that their influence on it is probably a good thing because The Amazing Spider-Man didn't do very well. So.
No, like I said, their track record's been pretty bad. That's what had me so worried about this. Where I was less concerned about Spider-Man Homecoming because I knew that was Marvel-led. With, like, you know, some assistance from Sony. For all I know, they're just cashing in on it, and that's literally all that they're doing. Maybe they get to make the toys or whatever for it, you know, for all I fucking know. What would you say about the action?
It was fun.
You've seen a lot of action movies. I've watched a lot of action movies with you. Would you say that this, like, had really good action, about what you'd expect? Anything really blow your mind about it?
It was fun. I particularly liked the car chase at the beginning.
Yeah.
Kind of right after Eddie gets the symbiote, and this is the first big thing that happens after he realizes what the symbiote's capable of. These guys break into his apartment, or not break in, he lets them in, against Venom's wishes, by the way. He says, cool. Don't open the door. Eddie's like, what? And then he opens the door, and then the symbiote messes up everybody, and then he hops on a motorcycle, and the symbiote's just like punching cars and separating parked cars and jumping up in the air and catching them. It's just a lot of fun car chase with these weird powers going on. It's really fun scene to watch.
Oh, and then finally when he grabs the last guy and the Venom suit like finally fully encompasses his body, right?
For the first time.
Because until then we hadn't seen it, and it just like covers him and you see this awesome face.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I like the, again, a little bit of an arc there. That moment I think he says, the guy's like, what are you? He says, I am Venom. Yeah. And then at the end of the movie, it's like, what are you? And he says, we are Venom.
Oh, yeah, including himself.
Eddie and Venom both embracing each other.
Right.
So, but yeah, that was a fun moment. And the action scene with the two symbiotes was interesting as well.
Yeah, the only problem I kind of had with that is, I don't know, it seemed a little rushed in one of those CGI fights. Like, there was a point where it felt like some of those Transformer movies, some of the criticisms that they get right, it's hard to tell what's even going on in some of those fights. It's just like someone took their action figures and just started doing that, you know? Yeah, well, so I kind of felt that way with the final fight, but it's a little hard to do when you got to work with two CGI characters.
Yeah.
But that's all you could do, right? Like, it
especially got messy when you could tell that the goal of each symbiote was to rip the other symbiote apart from its host. And so it's two, like, liquid beings, essentially, both ripping each other. So it's just kind of like a jumbled, slightly differently colored masses kind of entangling and messing with each other.
My least favorite action scene of the movie was actually those two fighting at the end. I thought the enemy symbiote had some pretty cool moves when he was by himself and he was terrorizing people and stuff like that. There's one where his, like, both of his arms turn into the axes and he goes like that and like clears the room or whatever. That was pretty cool.
I liked it when they were fighting each other like in the symbiote monster form as opposed to when they were trying to rip each other apart.
Yeah.
Because I did think it was cool when that guy's sitting there with swords trying to fight Venom, and Venom just has a blob of a shield and then punches him and kicks him, and it was that part was fun.
Yeah.
Until it got like the end of the fight. But it's part of what contributed to the end of that fight and why they had to do it the way they did with the symbiotes falling apart. I think is the when Anne comes in and turns the sound on.
Yeah,
which is their weakness. So they kind of fall apart at the seams when that happens. So.
The one thing that did worry me was the shot that I saw in the trailers, and that, besides Sony being in charge of this project, was something else that scared me. It's the part where he's flying in the air and the symbiote grabs onto the motorcycle. That played a little bit better in the movie, but on the screen in trailers, when I saw that, I was just like, no, this looks so stupid. That was really bad for me. That shot where he's just in the air and it just reaches out and grabs the motorcycle and puts it back on it. I don't know.
It was silly, but it's a silly character. So
yeah, what are you gonna do? But that was the one. That was the one fun for me. And so the cutscenes. That was the last thing, right? Just like any other Marvel movie, another thing to make you think Marvel, right, is they've got to have their mid-credit scene and then they've got to have their last scene, which they've managed to popularize in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So the first one, what was it?
The first one was Cletus Cassidy, or Carnage.
Also known as Carnage, played by who?
Woody Harrelson.
Right. I would have never guessed Woody Harrelson as Carnage, but now that I've seen it, I'm very excited to see what he does as a psychopath because he is a great actor. Now, like I said, he wouldn't have been my first pick. If you asked me who was going to play Carnage, the last fucking person I would ever say is Woody Harrelson. But now that I've seen it, I'm excited. The only thing is we've talked about the rated R problem before, and I think this is no more relevant now. It's more relevant now than it even was before because Carnage is just that. He's Carnage. The symbiote went into his body and his blood and basically turned his blood into like the suit or whatever, right? So he's like literally covered in his own blood. I don't see that really being PG-13. I don't know how you swing that, you know?
No, he's the most gruesome character that Marvel has. He's known for he's a serial killer. He's a psychopath, and he just goes around causing carnage and mayhem. And
some cheesy lines actually stick with me. At the end of the movie, there was this cheesy line that I just thought was so cool. Well, I mean, at the end of the scene, the movie's already over. But he says, I'm going to get out of here eventually, and when I do, there's going to be carnage. I was like, yes! It's so cheesy, but it's awesome.
Yeah, he said the character's name. It's like,
oh, man. All right, so what was the last cutscene? I'll let you talk about this one a little bit.
So the last cutscene was a scene from Into the Spider-Verse, the new animated Spider-Man movie that they're coming out with.
Yep, they sold us a trailer. That's what I think it was. It reminded me of the end of the first Captain America movie, where they just stick a trailer for Avengers there, and then they just called it a day. That's how I felt. They're just capitalizing more on Spider-Man. I'm not impressed. I didn't think the visuals were that good. Yeah, I'm going to hate on this movie pretty hardcore so far. I'm probably going to see it because my brother likes, cartoon movies a lot. It comes out around Christmas when he's in town. But I'm not excited for this. I couldn't care less.
Really?
Oh, yeah. You seemed pretty excited in the theater, so I felt bad, but I was... What the fuck is this?
I think it's a cool concept. I mean, it's a concept they kind of did a little bit in the Ultimate Spider-Man animated series where they had Peter Parker go into different dimensions, and he meets all of these characters basically while he's doing that. And so, except he meets like 2099 Spider-Man and all that nonsense. But
yeah,
it's kind of it looks like it's gonna be fun. I like a lot of the voice actors that are in it. Like John Mulaney's playing Spider-Ham, which is gonna be silly and ridiculous.
Yeah, actually, that could be that's got the best potential. Spider-Ham. That could be pretty exciting.
And Jake Johnson is the main Peter Parker, so it's and they do the Miles Morales Spider-Man. They do Gwen Stacy Spider-Man. They do a Spider anime thing that I've never seen before.
Well, Miles Morales, from what I could tell in the trailer, seems to be the main character.
Yes.
The only thing is, I think that they did this to kind of also test the waters with Miles Morales, because you always have old school people when Spider-Man movies or any comic book movies show up and they say, well, that's not really Spider-Man or that's not really Batman. I think right now that's still too new of an idea, and I think studios aren't prepared to take a risk on a full Miles Morales movie yet.
I think it's that.
I think that's part of the reason.
I think it's that, but I think it's also an attempt to introduce a broader market to the different versions of Spider-Man. Because I think most people probably aren't even aware that there's a Spider-Man outside of Peter Parker. So the Miles Morales is the most popular one, made popular very much so by Childish Gambino or Donald Glover voicing him on cartoons. And I think they're going to introduce all these different versions of Spider-Man, and then potentially one of those makes it into a live-action flick, or they turn this into more animated flicks, because the Marvel animated flicks have not been doing as well as DC. Like, the DC animated films are always great.
Yeah, DC's really putting their effort into those.
Yeah, so I think that this is Marvel's kind of attempt at saying, okay, let's try to get in there, and they're using one of their most popular characters, a bunch of versions of that most popular character. If any of these characters from this film take off, they can do their own individual.
They can even do spin-offs. Think about how the Lego movie did the Batman Lego movie. This could do any of that with any of those characters.
Exactly.
Just give Spider-Ham its own personal outing. Now that movie I would watch.
Especially with John Mulaney. Yeah, it could be fun.
I guess I don't really have any more problems with it. This has been a Real Talk. Let us know how we did in the comments. Let me know if we missed any Spider-Man nerd information that we should have known from such a video. We kind of did this on the fly. Saw the movie last night. I liked it. I'd watch it again. Did I think it was great? No. Do I think it deserves the bashing that it's getting on the internet and everywhere? No. Do I understand why it's getting the bashing that it is? Yes. What were your final thoughts on it? what score would you give the movie? ABC system or 1 out of 5. Let's pick one of those.
I would say that the people who are mad about this movie, again, you're just taking superhero movies too goddamn seriously. It's a silly character. It's a silly concept. It's a fucking alien that's wrapped around a person. It's silly. Don't take it so seriously. Have the fun that they're trying to give to you. It's a fun movie to watch. It's entertaining. It's colorful. Not really colorful, but fantastic looking. I give it a B.
I'd give it a C+. I don't think it's B material, but I think it's pretty damn close. I think it could have been much better than it was, but I didn't think it was a heaping pack of garbage either.
Yeah, it could have been better. They had restrictions, they had limitations, they had things they had to do because they couldn't stay really true to the character. But it was for me.
And in this day and age, how much studio input was there? How much, because that's had negative consequences before. Look at movies like Suicide Squad, right?
Exactly. They have to sell it, so the studio is going to make them abandon certain things, and that's why it was PG-13, guaranteed.
Yeah. Anyway, this has been another episode of Real Talk. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good night, everybody.
I'll fucking tie you to a fucking bedpost with your ass cheeks spread out and shit, right? Put a hanger on the fucking stove and let that shit sit there for like a half hour. Take it off and stick it in your ass slow like.
I fucking lay your nuts on a fucking dresser, just your nuts laying on a fucking dresser, and bang them shits with a spike fucking bat. What's a